Losing George Harrison on Thursday hit a lot of people like a death in the family, which is probably to be expected. For millions of us, the best part of the culture we live in began with the Beatles.
Oh, yeah, tell you something.
They came to us when we were children and took the place of cowboys and superheroes in our dreams. And then, very quickly, they grew up with us. They were like four big brothers getting to every new discovery a little ahead of us and reporting back. They were the hippest gang in town, and they made us feel like we could be part of that gang, too.
There are places I remember all my life.
When George died, the first thing the media said was the first thing they'd said in 1964. They called him the Quiet Beatle. That was never exactly right. What George was, from A Hard Day's Night to Let It Be, was the cool Beatle. He didn't stand up straight, he was a little surly. He made wisecracks out of the corner of his mouth.
Listen, I got a question for you. You home to get a haircut at all? No. I had one yesterday.
As fantastic as John, Paul, and Ringo were, you always knew that they liked being in showbiz. With George, you felt like all the fame kind of bugged him. It interfered with his guitar playing.
There was so much attention on the Beatles that it left very little space for privacy or just to breathe, generally. But at the same time, I realized there was such a lot of love. There's a lot of love out there for us, too.
Mick Jagger once called the Beatles the four-headed monster. They seemed like one being. In the early days, grown-ups couldn't tell them apart. Later, we divided them up. We decided John was the rebel.
I read the news today, oh boy.
Paul was the maestro. George was the mystic, and Ringo was the joker. But in fact, the Beatles were the Beatles because each of them was capable of so much. Each was a singer, each was a writer. Each could have been a star in his own right.
Something in the way she moves
George wrote and sang eternal songs, Something.
attracts me like no other man at you.
While my guitar gently weeps,
Here comes the sun.
here comes the sun.
Comes the sun. I say it's alright.
It was just a quirk of history that he happened to be standing next to the greatest songwriting team of the 20th century when he did so. He often joked that he had to wait until the Beatles had worked through every new Lennon and McCartney tune before they got around to one of his. Another songwriter of his talent would have been furious about it. George laughed it off. He said, "I was a year younger than Paul when we first met in school, and no matter how much we do, I'm still a year younger."
The sun. I say it's alright.
George Harrison's spiritual journey was lifelong and dedicated. In the very early days, when the other three Beatles made jokes about God and religion, George insisted there had to be more to life than the fame and fortune that came to him so young. His fascination with the spiritual influenced the whole Western world. George led the Beatles to India to study with the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi and set off an international fad.
And that's really, for every human, is a quest to find the answer to why are we here? Who am I? Where did I come from? Where am I going? That, to me, became the only important thing in my life. Everything else secondary.
My sweet Lord. My Lord.
The Caftans and Love Beats went away, but meditation, Eastern philosophy, and yoga stuck around and wound their way into Western life. I once asked George if, as a believer in reincarnation, he thought that the Beatles must have done wonderful things in their past lives to be so blessed in this one. He said he looked at it differently. He said, if you really believe that we're here to find enlightenment, to figure out God's will, then what could be more distracting, what could be more destructive to that than to have the whole world laid before you? He said all those temptations really just get in the way of finding out the true meaning of life.
Before this dance is through, I think I'll love you too. I'm so happy when you dance with me.
It is a mark of George Harrison's strength of character that he saw the success of the Beatles not as an end, but as a first step on a voyage toward enlightenment. He was no monk. He loved life, laughed all the time, and appreciated the wonders he encountered. But he never took so much from the world that he would be unwilling to let it go. And now he is finally where he spent his extraordinary life preparing to be, at the start of his next journey.